Once more, Jesus spoke to the chief priests and Pharisees in parables. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again, he sent other slaves, saying, "Tell those who have been invited, 'Look, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away. One to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' The slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" The Gospel of the Lord. When I was in high school, I remember still very clearly, one year, well, it was my last year of high school, I had a car. I was all excited I had a car. And a friend asked for a ride home, and it was the day before American Thanksgiving, which is always on a Thursday in November. So this was a Wednesday afternoon. And this guy, his family had a fair amount of money. They lived in a nice section of the city, and I dropped him off. I was on my way to my grandparents' house a couple of hours away and was passing that direction. So I went inside to say hi to his mother, and she had the table set for Thanksgiving already. And it was fine china, crystal, linen napkins, gold flatware, candelabra. It was really elegant. And inside, I was just laughing. And I couldn't imagine, because for me, Thanksgiving was something totally different. I was on my way to my grandma's house, where every year for Thanksgiving and for Christmas and for Easter, we would be about 50 people. And this was before there were many disposable plates. My grandma had a stack of plates that were mismatched, and many of them were chipped, and a pile of cheap cutlery. And when you go into her kitchen, on the stove, there was always a turkey, and there were chickens, and usually sausage and ham, and there were two kinds of dressing. This is Texas, so you got to have cornbread dressing, and she did another rice dressing. And the table was filled with all the sides, mashed potatoes and yams and green beans and all those things. And then she had a chest freezer in her kitchen, and there is where everybody put their desserts, and there were cakes and pies. It was amazing. And we would be always about 50 people, and we'd fill the dining room and the living room and the front porch, and some people would be sitting on the edges of the beds in the bedrooms. It was this huge thing. My dad was one of 8, and we're 23, 24 in my generation, plus my friends, my cousins that lived nearby would invite their friends, and their friends would all be like, "Wow, I've never seen anything like this before. All this food and all these people." That, I think, is a little bit like what Isaiah describes. God sets forth this incredible feast for us. Rich foods, fine wines, rich food filled with marrow, ossobuco for the Italians. Well-aged wine, strained clear. I mean, this is class. But it's for everybody, is what we hear in this wedding banquet. Everybody. And not just the fancy people, but the poor people, the outcasts, the ones on the streets. It's for everybody. It's an amazing story that Jesus tells us. It could sound a bit harsh. There's some harsh words in today's gospel, but I want to invite you to listen to it the way the first hearers of this gospel would have heard it. They would have been Matthew's community. This was from the Gospel of Matthew. And Matthew's community were a group of converted Jews. So they were Christians who had been Jewish. And they were the poor. They were the people who didn't count in society. And the Pharisees, the scribes, in other words, the priests and the bishops, basically, the leaders, they had rejected Jesus. They didn't want anything to do with him, and they weren't part of the Christian community. So they saw themselves as the ones who were answered. And this thing about burning the city, Scripture scholars say, wasn't even in the first rendition of the Gospel of Matthew. It was added later on after the Romans had destroyed Jerusalem, and they saw that as kind of a prediction in there that even the city of these leaders got burned. But what they saw it as was this incredible scene that God paints. All of us are invited to the banquet. Not just the powerful, not just the rich, not just those who fit all the proper categories, but everybody. Or as Pope Francis says in his recent encyclical this past week called Fratelli Tutti, and they keep the Italian title even in English, thankfully, because otherwise it'd be brothers all is what they were talking about it. But it's brothers and sisters. It's a quote from St. Francis of Assisi in saying that we are all sisters and brothers, all of us, no matter what race, no matter what religion, no matter what class, status, any of that stuff. We're all interconnected. And these people would have seen that. But like almost everything, there's a little hitch. And that hitch is when you got to it, is we have to act according to the ways of the kingdom. We have to act according to Jesus' teaching. When you got to a wedding in Jesus' day, according to at least one of my scripture professors when I was a seminarian, they had garments ready for you to put on, the wedding garment. Just the same way when we have confirmation, we get these red gowns for the students to wear. And the reason we do that is because some have money and would buy very nice clothes, and some don't have money and would be a little shabbily dressed, and then it would become a who's better than the other. And so, nope, everybody gets this red gown. And in Jesus' day, when you went to a fancy wedding, you got a wedding garment. But this guy refused to put it on. This guy says, I want the community, I want the meal, but I don't want to act according to the way you want me to act. And Jesus says, So it's a time for rejoicing that we are all invited. And for me, it's also a time of great challenge because I have to look at myself and say, am I living the way Christ calls me to live? Am I following the teachings of Jesus? Am I, as Pope Francis asks us, am I treating everyone as my sister or brother? So as we give thanks to God for our many blessings, Paul mentions that we have, he knows how to live in abundance and in scarcity. And I know for many people right now, it's not necessarily scarce, although for some it is. But certainly with COVID, it's different, it's challenging, it hurts. We've all had losses of one way or another. And the challenge is to, as followers of Christ and as sisters and brothers of one another, to realize that no matter what the situation, there is always something for which to give thanks. Always a blessing there for God. May we recognize that and be people of thanksgiving.